It's really easy to forget why it is we make certain decisions when those decisions become long-term plans, or even better put, routines, things we just don't think about. And one routine or lifestyle or way of living my life that I've been thinking about for the last couple of months has been the decision to effectively eject women from my life. That is, just not dealing with them. Something that I've decided to do since, going on 10 years now. And it's easy to forget how that all works and why I made that decision in the first place. But one thing that I've done in recent months and years is listen to other men and almost vicariously relive certain experiences they're going through, reflecting on my own. That seemed to reinforce, at least for me, the fact that it definitely has been the right call. Now, I want to say at the outset, obviously, I'm not speaking for all men or most men. You go do what you want, whatever that might be. I'm talking about myself, and more broadly, I'm speaking for men who have decided to simply eschew women and just not have them be a factor in their lives, apart from necessary interactions like the bank teller or the supermarket grocer, take your pick. See, the thing is, and I mentioned this in my video on memory, you have that brief window of opportunity to really appreciate the release from something that's been really oppressive or heavy or something that's really just gotten you down. And then you tend to forget it and you seek to recreate it all the time. And I've been away from women for such a long time, that is in my own personal interaction with them, outside of the necessary day-to-day stuff, that a lot of the things I read and hear and talk to people about, men about, seem alien to me, foreign sometimes. But it wasn't always the case. For example, it's really difficult for me to slip into the mind or the mindset of a really blue pill guy who knows next to nothing about women or Evo Psych or whatever. He just thinks they're, funny people that he's attracted to with, breasts in a hole or something, right? Rather than any of the other stuff. I look at everything from an evolutionary perspective, everything related to humans at least, and animals more broadly. But I can't slip myself into that guy's head any more than he can do for me. And then there are these people in between, so-called purple pillars, guys who are kind of savvy, but not entirely. But what I've really tried to understand has been my own personal decision to forsake women in a personal sense, interacting with them directly, through the lens of other men that I've talked to and engaged with that serve as potent reminders, because otherwise I just don't even know what that's like. You got problems with your wife or your girlfriend or whatever, kind of vaguely remember stuff like that, but it's been such a long time for me. So I don't remember it in any great detail. But then when I hear it from somebody else, it all comes rushing back. Maybe not as vividly as the moment itself would have been for me, but I remember. So before I proceed, I want to mention two things. Two critical things. Looking back on it, they were not critical. Looking back on it, they were not essential. But looking back on it now, from my perspective, as a middle-aged man who's been going his way for about a decade, I really realize that these women were telling me the absolute truth, and they weren't shy about it. And it was a blueprint. So two ex-wives of mine, Stardust speak, by the way, never was married, just married. Two ex-wives of mine. First one, two long-lasting relationships, who told me in a moment of rare truth, "You are replaceable," translated from the German. And at the time, that statement struck me as uncivil, to say the least, or inhumane. How could she say something like that? But retrospectively, she was just being honest. You have to think about the fundamental question. that women ask themselves, almost subconsciously, about the men they choose to interact with. What is that question? It's a perennial question. What can you do for me? That's really what that's translating into, indirectly. You're replaceable. What can you do for me? You're not doing enough for me now, so I'll find somebody else who can do something. And that was, you could say, my very first red pill without me even realizing it. And we're going back a long time, over 2 decades ago. The second red pill, probably the more critical one when I think about it, that at the time I didn't think anything of it other than this is a cruel thing to say. It's horrible. And certainly what I'm about to describe really defies any sense of decorum or normal conduct. Again, another German ex-wife, translated from the German, who told me at the very end of this relationship, after a few breakups, getting back together, this is a direct quote, translated from German, "I've done the cost-benefit analysis, and frankly speaking, you cost more than you're useful to me." Now, you might not believe me, but that's actually what this female said. She also happened to have borderline personality disorder. And I'd like to think that that was, in a way, allowing her to be untypically honest for a female. Because that is pretty uncivil, to say the least, in a breakup line. I've done the cost-benefit analysis, and you're just not useful enough to me. Or you cost me more, right, than you are useful. That's not something you would typically expect. But again, looking back on it, and thinking about all the things I've learned since then, it seems pretty obvious. That's that question again, right? What can you do for me? Well, you're not doing enough for me, so you're not useful to me. Literally, you're not useful. That's what she told me. Du bist mir mehr Kosten als Nutzen. Direct quote from the German. You cost more than you are useful to me. And it's so clear now, retrospectively, what was going on there. That these were extremely rare moments of honesty on their part. No bullshit, no frills, nothing. Just, hey, I'm going to be honest with you. You're replaceable, and you're not useful to me, so goodbye. And again, retrospectively, in hindsight, I look at that and I realize all the things that I've learned subsequently map onto that and describe something that was sitting there before my eyes and flowing into my ears. And I just wanted to mention that stuff to give a little bit of a backstory of how some of the things I've learned in subsequent years and decades filtered back and forth and made the entire process of how I got here a lot more clear, or clearer than it had been at the time, certainly, my various decisions. As I said, in a way, I'm trying to understand my own decisions vicariously through other men by listening to their stories and interacting with them. And time and again, I encounter these men, and it speaks more to the universality of the experience of interacting with females, as a male, of these things that recur constantly. So I'll give you an example. I used to have an ex-wife who was paranoid and highly insecure, jealous of everything, right? Always asking where I was going, what I was doing, asking for texts and validation through texts, always suspicious of something. No justification behind it, never cheated on that bitch, never did anything. Still, always got it. And it drove me absolutely insane. Always having to report in, say what I was doing. I speak oftentimes about freedom. Well, here's a great context. Freedom from that? Oh, I can't tell you how good that tastes. And lo and behold, over the last couple of years, I've encountered huge swaths of men, and some of them I get to know better, that tell me very similar stories. She always wants to know what I'm doing. She sends me texts. She's asking where I'm going. She doesn't trust me. I never cheated on her. She has no reason. All insecurities emanating from the female, nothing to do with the male in question. And I just think this is absolute insanity. But the real question is, why do these guys put up with it? And this could be applied to virtually any situation. I think of other situations where there's constant strife, this classic back and forth, you know. When things are great, they're really great. And when things are bad, they're really bad, that sort of thing. Only if you were to break it down to percentages, which I don't really suggest, it's impossible to quantify these things. We're talking about a measly amount of time where things are actually great, and most of the time it sucks. And what I've noticed about blue-pilled men or purple-pilled men is they're not really doing the calculus in their head. Here's the thing, gentlemen. When I reflect back on those two ex-wives of mine, what they said to me, that I was replaceable and that I wasn't useful anymore, basically, I realized that, of course, we all do this calculus, sort of, but women are just very direct, oftentimes very overt about it. And I had to look at my relationships from that perspective as well. Not from an identical perspective, after all, I'm not a female, but in the sense that, what am I getting out of this? And I realized increasingly as I imbibed more and more pills, so to speak, that I wasn't getting very much out of it at all. I mean, sex, sometimes, okay, whatever, not a big deal. Especially as you get older, it's really not a big deal. But a lot of aggravation, a lot of stress. That was the big factor for me. I'm not particularly stress resilient, I will admit that. I have lots of sleeping problems, as you know, and I try to avoid stress. Whatever it might be, I try to minimize stress in my life because it's a killer, number one, and I don't deal with it well, and it ruins my entire picture of health. And number one, every time I thought about it in the past, and reflecting recently on these interactions with other men and the stories they tell me, I realized that these women were the biggest source of stress for me. And frankly speaking, based on my own interpretation for these guys, I'm talking about for them too, but that's neither here nor there. And I came up with my own calculus that if I'm going to pursue a relationship, is it going to be more stress or less stress for me? And the neutral state, not being in a relationship, is the gold standard. Remember I mentioned in that previous video on freedom that the competition is nothing. And if a female cannot beat the nothing competition, if she's too much of an imposition such that the stress levels rise above what that neutral state would be, well, I would never entertain such a female. And time and again, it has proven to be the case. It's why I just don't deal with them. And this is the thing that I try to point out to these guys. They don't think about it in these terms. Because men say what you want. You could say everything's tit for tat and every human interaction has a utility function, sure. But men don't think in those terms. They don't think, well, she's replaceable, I'll just get a new one. They don't think about things in terms of cost-benefit analysis typically. I mean, they can, sure. But it's not the typical instinctual way they go for these things. But when we actually pick these relationships apart and you sit these men down, so to speak, to have a chat, a man-to-man chat with them about their relationships and where things are going, they feel this immense sense of dependency on these females. Obviously, it's natural. It's our biology. But they never sit down to do the calculation. They never think, what am I getting out of this? And is this really beneficial to me? Until you point it out to them and you say, look, have you ever sat down and just thought about this? Are you more stressed out with or without this female? And oftentimes these relationships are running so long they can't even remember. But in the few cases where they can, they realize that, yeah, my life has never been as stressful as it is now. Females cause stress. But what's always struck me about these men I engage with, in much the same way as, I guess, a younger version of myself, is these men don't think they can exist or live without these females. In the sense that the pursuit of women always needs to be some major factor in their life. The whole you're single or you're married thing. Single, married, that back and forth constantly. But never once do they stop and think, look, I don't have to do this. And more to the point, by not doing this, I'm saving myself time, money, and boatloads of stress. Again, I get these glimpses into these other people's relationships, and I just think, by the gods, that I make the right decision. Again, you want to interact with women, it's up to you. Maybe this video won't resonate with you. Probably won't. But here's the thing for me, as somebody who just doesn't deal with them, I don't regret anything about it. Freedom is an abstraction, but the reality is, when I talk about it in concrete terms, It's that reduction in stress. Having more money is great too, sure. But not wanting to deal with this insanity. Because these guys are losing it. They really are, and they think there's no way out. They just think they're stuck there, and there's no choice. Until you come along and tell them, look, you don't have to be in this relationship. And they kind of get that. They know, well, you should look for somebody better. No, that's what I'm saying. You don't have to be in any relationship. You can live your life in accordance with your own whims and desires. You can, in fact, push the eject button on all of this, walk away, and never look back. And I guarantee you, if you have the right mentality or the right mental constitution, you'll be better off for it. Because I do think men can learn from women in this regard. Women, subconsciously or otherwise, are doing these cost-benefit utility calculations. And I don't think men do it often enough. If you're going to deal with a female, if you're going to pursue a relationship with a female, you better believe that she's doing that calculation on you. So what's to stop you from doing that on her? It's only fair. And if you are doing that cost-benefit analysis, as my ex-wife had explained to me so lovingly so many eons ago, and you come up with a bunch of numbers, so to speak, that are in the negative, what the hell are you doing there? All it is dependency and your own false belief that you need this person, this thing, referring to the relationship, to do what? Complete you? It's not completing you. It's giving you a heart attack slowly but surely. It's ruining your health. And she doesn't give a shit. And more importantly, she's not looking to improve herself. She'll tell you day in and day out how you need to do this and that, and you need to work on yourself. And what the fuck is she doing? More likely than not, settled in the relationship as she is. She's just sitting on her fucking ass, getting fat and frumpy, and you probably don't even want to fuck her anymore after a couple of years. So, again, the main point of this video is for men who haven't thought about this, men who've been down the path I've been down for a long time, but sometimes forget what went into it, what the thought processes were. For those of you who are new to this, you don't have to do that. You don't have to pursue relationships. I mean, it sounds like such an elementary thing, but it really isn't, because everyone is telling you should. They might not say you have to, but the should is more or less equatable with you have to. You can turn your back on it and just walk away. You can go your own way, right? You don't have to do it. And honestly, I would ask the question, if you're suffering in one of these marriages or relationships, why are you bothering? Have you done your own cost-benefit analysis? Again, too few men do that. If I could thank my ex-wives, I would. I don't have any contact with them anymore, but they're incredibly helpful, retrospectively. Even though all the things I learned on my own subsequently, thinking what they told me made me realize this all. And so you can say this video is sort of a culmination of thoughts and experiences. Having gone my own way for a while now, having eschewed female contact, having not dealt with females, and gaining insight from other people's experiences of the stress, the neuroticism, the insanity that women typically put men through. Personally, I can't fathom how any male would want to deal with that. Although I guess if you're really young and you have a really strong libido and you need to get your dick wet all the time, I kind of get that. But beyond that, not juice not worth the squeeze, as the late great Barbarossa once said. So I don't know how helpful this is. I hope it is. But if there's any takeaway from this, I just want to say is that there is a life after women, and it continues until it doesn't. And it's really not that bad, and it's probably better than the life you had with women. Imagine not having some harpy screeching in your ears, or sending you texts and trying to check up on where you are 24/7, or projecting their neuroticism and their insecurity onto you, and wanting you to do a million different things. Imagine all of that. Imagine just quiet. Imagine silence. Imagine nobody nagging you. Imagine all these things. And guess what? They can be yours. They're not even hard to acquire. You just need to turn your back on all this other bullshit. But you, the man, have been brainwashed your entire life, child, adult, take your pick, both, to think that that's not possible. That you have to continually saddle up again and try the experiment again and again and again. To what end, I ask? It's all the same. Human beings are basically the same. Sure, we get along better with some human beings, but all those behaviors and idiosyncrasies that you can't stand, that drive you insane, you're going to find it again. Women are women at the end of the day. And I'm just saying, my perspective, it just ain't worth it. Anyway, a video that's been a long time coming. Haven't thought about these things for quite some time. And I will check you out a later date, assuming I'm still alive. As always, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.